Hey guys, how you doing today? I want to talk about minorities and education. So the question is, will education help minorities? Will education put minorities at an advantage? Now, when I say minorities, I'm not just strictly talking about ethnicity or the black race. It expands beyond that, right? It goes into other races, Native Americans, Hispanics, and so forth, right? It goes into social, economic status, political status, gender. There are a lot of elements under the umbrella of a minority. So it's just not just race. But will education help minorities? We know that research says minorities are underrepresented, and which calls for more reason for us to get education. I feel like the education that I currently have has helped me get in my role. Now, is it fair sometimes? No, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm in my role now. I'm thankful that I have the opportunity. I feel like if I didn't have that education, I wouldn't have been given the opportunity. And in my experience, I feel that, and I don't know if this applies across the board, but from my experience, and I've heard uh, my friends, my minority friends say this, that minorities have to go the extra mile in order to survive. And that may be true. Of course, I felt like it's true in, some roles that I served in. So for example, if there's a position that requires you to have a bachelor's degree, it has been said as a minority, you might want to try to have a master's degree. And I've experienced that. I have a master's degree and I also have a PMP certification. Y'all know that certification is a very powerful tool to have in the business world. Now, I've worked on some projects, but I haven't really worked on projects at the level that I should with that certification. In fact, that certification is I'm being underutilized for it. In fact, a recruiter once said to me almost 10 years ago, he said, "Nate, the level of education you have," now this was 10 years ago, he said, "you should be right at the 120K mark." That's what he said. I'm like, "Oh, really?" Needless to say, I wasn't making that much, and not making that much right now, 10 years later. Making a decent amount, but not that much. But I believe my education has helped me get there. I do feel that as a minority, in order to combat the stereotypes and the perceptions that come with being a minority, I think education and, just really educating yourself and getting all the education you can, I think it will help your situation. So I believe more doors will open. It's going at a slower pace, and I think because of the minority status, because I have witnessed my non-minority friends who don't have, the level of education, but are experiencing advancements at a faster rate. Now, I'm not disgruntled about that. Like I say, it is what it is. I know what I'm up against. I know what I'm facing. Therefore, I know what I have to do. I survived this long doing what I'm doing, and I might be lagging behind. I might feel like I'm lagging behind my other counterparts, but you know what? I'm hanging in there, and I have a decent life. I'm thankful. So we just have to work that much harder. And I come on this channel just giving you the real. I'm not cutting any corners. I'm not sugarcoating anything. I'm not racist, as I stated before, and I'm not disgruntled. I'm just sharing my experience as a minority. Maybe this will help some minority who are just coming out of college, going into the corporate world. Colleges are not going to tell you the bad, good, and ugly. They're not going to tell you all the aspects of what you have to deal with of being a minority. I'm telling you from experience. These are the things that I've experienced. Now, the downside of being educated is not being so boastful. And how can I explain this? Let's see. Be proud of your education, but don't boast with it. You're right. Don't go in and say, "I have this and I have that." I remember one time I did that because I was actually proud of my education and I verbalized it, especially when I got the PMP and I got the master's. And so one of the managers said, you're highly educated here. Take this. Basically, he gave me a project and just, I was supposed to hit the ground running without any instructions and any direction. He just said, go and this is what needs to be done. There was no steps, no process or anything. And I think he was doing that to retaliate against me because I had mentioned the level of education I had. In fact, I had a little more education than he had. So I think that was a moment of retaliation. So at that moment, I learned my lesson. As a minority, everybody's not going to be proud of your education. Sometimes it will be used against you. So that's why I kind of go in there. I don't really brag about it. It ain't like I went to the best schools or anything like that, like I went to Harvard or whatever. But, in my experience having a master's when my boss had a bachelor's degree, and many of them were proud, but there were a couple that I worked for that, you can kind of feel a little tension there. So, but one boss in particular, he just said, hey, look, since you're so educated here, take this and make this happen. I'm like, what? So he actually used that against me. So at that point, I learned not to really brag about it. I'm proud of it. I mean, if the conversation comes up, yeah, we could talk about it, but there's a way to talk about it where you don't seem to be like, hey, I don't want it to appear that, hey, I'm educated now, so I can hang with you. I can hang with the big guys now. No, because now you set yourself up, for some issues. So right now, I just kind of do what I need to do. People will hear about your education, and if they decide to come to you to congratulate you, or maybe say, hey, don't you have a master's? Don't you have a PMP? I think this role is good for you. I have yet to have that to happen to me. No one owes me anything. I don't expect for it to happen. It might. I don't know. I have seen it happen to others. Others don't have to apply for certain positions. Sometimes the authorities, the powers that be, will come to them and say, hey, I feel like this role will be good for you. I will guide you. I will help you. I will mentor you. And I've seen that. I've seen people go into advancement with no knowledge, but the authorities were willing to be patient with the learning curve. And, unfortunately, that hasn't happened to me. So I just do what I need to do. Like I said, I am thankful for the role that I'm in. And I feel like had it not been for my education, of course, along with experience and expertise, I wouldn't be at the level I am. Things could always be worse. But I also learned not to really boast and brag and verbalize the education level that I have. If somebody wants to know, let them come ask me, or we can talk about it. Or if I'm applying for another job or another role, I put it down on paper. And I also learned that education can be somewhat threatening, and you can be overly educated or qualified for certain positions. So, I remember before when I applied for one role, it was when I was laid off. There were some downsizing a few years ago, and I applied for one role. I didn't even put nothing on the resume about a master's. I just put a bachelor's because I felt like it would have been, a little bit too much for that role. So I think we have to be careful. I'm not saying don't put your skills on there, but from my experience, it can be too much, right? You want to put enough skills and education that's commensurate with the position that you're going for. Now, I don't know if that's good advice for you or not. I'm just telling you, again, my experience. Now, if I'm going for an executive role, then yes, you want to pull it all out. It depends on the role. That's a high role. I want to put everything down: the bachelor's, the master's, the PMP, the pursuit of a doctorate in organizational leadership. You want to put all that down. The experiences you've had, the difference you made in the corporate world, what the contributions you made, the dollar value that you've contributed to cost savings or process improvements or whatever the case is. you want to put down everything. But maybe for lower level roles, you want to put enough, maybe just a little bit more than enough to be competitive. That's just my experience. But education does help. In fact, if you don't get education, minorities, I believe you're shooting yourself in the foot. I know there are a lot of family members, friends that I know who don't even have high school diplomas. And it's really hurting them. And some have high school diplomas and don't even have a bachelor's degree, and it's hurting them. It's hard enough out there for minorities to attain roles that they really want. So in order to help yourself, get the education for those roles. In fact, I believe we should over-educate ourselves, if I may, right? Because you never know what role that you might be interested in. You have all the tools you need. Let me just give you an example. This might be kind of extreme, but if you're going for a customer service role, maybe you don't need to put down a master's. Maybe you don't need to put down a PhD. And then again, maybe you do, because there may be some potential. They might look at you and say, hey, the reason why I say that, because in many cases, it's like, okay, you too overly qualified for it. And then again, some companies might say, hey, we'll hire you. You're overqualified, but we'll hire you for this role with the potential of promoting you in management because it looks like you have the necessary skills. So it just depends. It just depends. That's a judgment call on your part. But education does help. Thank you for listening.